here? I think I want to be a little closer to you, so I'm going to do it from right here. I know you're missing your regular pastor, Pastor Justin, but I am thinking of him where he is far away from here, and I'm glad to be here with you in his place this morning. So will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts and the way we live our lives, God, please you, make you glad. You are our God, our strength, our Redeemer. Amen. So I want you to see if you can picture the scene that we just read from the story of Jesus. In the middle of the big city, Jerusalem, there was a pool, and it was fed by an underground spring. And legend said that every once in a while, an angel would come and stir up the waters in the pool. And when that happened, the first person to get in the pool would be healed. So it kind of seemed like a magical place. A place where God might touch you if you could get yourself into a good position, so you could be the first one in the water. If you're a little more cynical, you might say it was sort of a healing lottery, where in an instant, your sickness or your disability might be instantly cured. Of course, people would come there if they had the chance to be healed, right? But because the angel didn't visit the water all that often, and there was no published schedule for these miracles, people gathered around the pool and they just waited. Hundreds, thousands, we really don't know. But there were enough people that someone had built porches all around the pool so that the blind and the paralyzed people who came and waited there had some shelter from the sun and from the rain when they needed it. Well, the man in this story was one of the people who was resting there in the shade, waiting for the waters to bubble up and for the angel of healing to arrive. 38 years he had spent by the side of that pool. He had a mat that he laid on, and I imagine that over 38 years he'd accumulated a lot of other stuff too. Maybe eating utensils, a change or two of clothes, a blanket for cold nights. He had friends around him, people he'd gotten to know while he'd been there. And they came and they went. Maybe some of them got healed. No doubt some of them gave up and moved on. It wasn't exactly home, but for this man, it wasn't really so bad. He got comfortable there. He never got to the water. And in fact, he kind of stopped trying to get to the water. But what he'd found instead there was a sort of support group for people who were as unfortunate as he was. People who, just like him, had not much hope. And all of them had lots of stories to share about how unfair life had been to them. And then one day, Jesus showed up. Now, Jesus was known as a healer. And there were lots of people around that day, lots of people who needed to be healed, right? That's why they were there. These were all people who needed to be healed. And we don't know whether Jesus stopped and talked with any of those other people or healed any of them while he was walking through there. It's hard for me to imagine that he didn't heal some of them, but we don't know that because that's not the point of the story. The story that John wanted us to hear in this gospel, the story he wants us to hear about Jesus, is about Jesus' conversation with this man who has really been living by the side of this pool for the last 38 years. Now, Jesus must have seen right past the surface of this guy, right into his heart, because he asked the man a question that I think otherwise might have seemed kind of rude or insensitive. Jesus said to the man, "Do you want to be healed? Do you want to be made well?" And what we have to notice first in the story, I think, is that the man doesn't answer Jesus' question. Instead, he starts right into sort of a litany of why he hasn't been healed until now and why he can't actually get better. He says, "Well, look at me. I'm paralyzed. When the waters stir up, I don't have anybody to help me. And when I try to make my way to the pool on my own, other people get in the way. How rude is that? So, of course, I can't get there in time to be the first one in the pool." And he keeps talking. And no doubt he had given this speech before. So he never answered Jesus' question. He probably never even heard Jesus' question, because he was so firmly fixed on what was in between him and that pool. There's a healer standing in front of him, and the guy looks right at Jesus, and he thinks, "You're not going to carry me into that pool either, are you?" And in his mind, there was only one way for healing to happen. It was for him to get to that pool. If someone came along to save him, it was going to have to be somebody who was fast enough and strong enough to run right over those other people who were trying to get in the pool ahead of him. Now, I don't know anything about the condition that this man suffered from. Maybe he was really, really ill and had been for all those 38 years. But it does seem like this story is different from the other healing stories in the Gospels. All those stories where Jesus didn't hesitate to reach out to someone in compassion, to take them as they are and to just say, "Come, I love you. I want you to be well." This time, to this man, Jesus says, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." In other words, stop waiting for someone else to carry you. Stop waiting for other people to get out of the way. Jesus saw right into him. For you, Jesus was saying to this man, the problem is not in your legs. It's in your mind and in your heart. This is not a story about healing this man's body. This is a story about healing the sickness in his soul. You know, in my life, before I was a pastor, I spent quite a few years being an unhappy lawyer. For almost 15 years, I practiced law, and I would cycle about every 3 years through a time when I felt like I could not do that job one more week. I had a whole litany of complaints. I didn't like fighting with people for a living. I didn't feel like I was helping anyone. But I was stuck, I thought. I took classes on alternative careers for lawyers. Classes with titles like Follow Your Bliss or Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. But mostly, I kind of thrashed around. I was unhappy, discontent. I wasn't sure what a better life would look like. So I couldn't just make a change, right? I didn't know what to do. And of course, I talked about my unhappiness pretty much all the time. Probably even more annoyingly than I remember. What I do remember is that one night in the kitchen of the house that we lived in, my husband and daughter and my husband and I were talking. We'd come home from work, and Terry, that was my husband's name, Terry and I were standing on opposite sides of the kitchen, each of us leaning against a counter, and we were telling each other stories about our work days. And I had launched into a very familiar refrain about wishing I had a different career. And in just one moment that I have remembered in more than 20 years since this conversation happened, Terry looked right at me and he said, "Stop obsessing." I was hurt. I was mad. I thought he wasn't listening to me well enough. The voice of God does not always come to us gently. With just those two words, which Terry probably said out of frustration more than compassion, I heard what I needed to hear at that moment. It was like a little kick that dislodged me from that place I had gotten stuck. For a while, at least, I actually did stop worrying and turning over and over in my mind a situation that I could not change at that moment. It's not like a whole beautiful future laid itself out in front of me. I had no idea how the circumstances of my life would eventually get put together to send me in a different direction. But for that moment, at least, I was free to stand up and stop wallowing in my unhappiness. Now, I know what a privileged problem it was that I had let consume me. Who really cares about a lawyer who can't find job satisfaction? When there are all those people all over the world who need healing, real healing, and who really are unable to move out of their hunger, or the only job that is feeding their family, or a war zone, or a refugee camp, or the prison of illness. There are many people whose illness or addiction or poverty locks them into a darkness that only the miracle of healing can break through. But I wonder if, for most of us, there isn't some part of us that's a little bit more like the guy by the side of the pool, needing, maybe as much as healing itself, someone who can see that we've gotten comfortable in our own discomfort. Someone who will dig down underneath the speeches we have ready about why nothing can change, to see that being responsible, meaning able to respond, has become even more frightening than whatever is wrong with us, our loneliness or our worry or our sadness. We need someone who will see the truth of our lives and ask us that hard question: do you want to be made well? Turns out, the guy by the pool could walk, even when he couldn't answer the question that Jesus asked him. The truth is, he hadn't been sure that he wanted to be made well. Even his hope for his own body had gotten buried under all those years of watching for a miracle in the water. And the truth in Jesus' question is what set him free. Not because he understood it completely or because he rethought what he believed about healing, but because Jesus wanted that healing for him. This is what Jesus does. He sees us as we really are. He offers us the truth. He takes what is most broken inside of us and he holds it up until our eyes see it differently. He loves us, sometimes even with words that sound harsh. He loves us into wholeness. Healing may not look like what we thought it was supposed to be. Maybe the healing we need most isn't actually about the magical water at all. Maybe in some way it is possible for our spirits to stand up, pick up our mats, and walk. Even in the places we have long thought of next to the words, I can't. So what is that place for you? Whatever it is that you are sick and tired of, whether it's your body or a stubbornly hard relationship or a dis-ease that is deep down in your soul. No matter how many people and obstacles stand in your way, in between you and what you thought was the healing pool, maybe today, someone is standing in front of you asking, do you want to be made well? And whatever your answer is, even if you can't answer at all, maybe today, the one who can see right into you, that one is saying, come, pick up your mat. Leave all that other stuff. You don't need it. Be free. Amen.